Mind Shift Power Podcast.
This is Mind Shift Power Podcast, the #1 critically acclaimed podcast where we have raw, unfiltered conversations that shape tomorrow. I'm your host, Fatima Bey, the Mind Shifter. And welcome, everyone. Today we have with us Shirin Yazdian, and she is out of London, England, in the UK. She is 24. She is working on her master's in psychology, and she's an award-winning speaker and advocate. And she herself is neurodivergent. How are you doing today, Shirin?
Hello, I'm good, thank you. Thank you for having me.
And thank you for coming on. I'm looking forward to this conversation. So as in my usual Fatima form, I like to dive right in. So tell us, for those out there listening who don't really know, this word is thrown around a lot, but I'm not sure everybody knows what it means. What is a neurodivergent person?
So anyone that diverges, sorry, let me start again. Everyone has, let me do that again. Everyone's brain works differently. And based on an average of majority of people, we've decided what is neurotypical. We've decided what is majority of people's way of thinking and way of being. Whoever doesn't fit into that narrative is neurodivergent and is diverging from a neuronormativity, from something that as a society we've decided that is our normal. So that can be ADHD, autism, dyslexia, dyspraxia, tics, Tourette's. Some people who are OCD identify as neurodivergent. It's a very inclusive word. Essentially it comes from Neurodiversity paradigm that says, just like we don't have a correct or normal culture, language, sexuality, we also don't have a correct or normal neurotype.
Okay. So, and I asked that because neurodivergent is, like I said, a term that gets thrown around a lot, but every time I ask it, I get a different answer. They do summarize down to the same thing, but I like for people to hear it differently. So what makes you neurodivergent?
So I'm ADHD dyslexic, and recently I've been thinking that I'm also possibly autistic, and that's something I'm exploring for myself.
Okay. I think that I just want to comment on the autism part.
Yeah.
The more I talk to neurodivergent people and those who work with neurodivergence in the field, the more I'm recognizing, I think that a lot of people are walking around undiagnosed with different neurodivergent diagnoses. I have met people who found out later in life that they're actually autistic. I've seen people who recognize as adults that their parents are autistic and just were never diagnosed. I think that's, what do you think about that?
So I think actually we know very little about autism, ADHD, dyslexia because of the research, because of, the poor research that we did beforehand. That was, the case for everything, not just neurodiversity. And also, medical racism. So we mostly studied, everything in boys and men, typically white men, and we excluded everyone else in our experiments, in our studies. So, I do psychology, so I'm really also interested in research aspect of stuff. And I think that's one of the main reasons, because now we're catching up. So our research is recognizing that lots of autistic people are also non-binary, lots of autistic people, a lot of more autistic people exist than we originally knew. Mm-hmm. But there's also something else about autism is that up until, very recently, there were quite a few different diagnoses with different names, different criteria. Yeah. But recently, they're all combined into an autism diagnosis. Oh. So before, there was Asperger's, there was autism, but now they both go under the same category in DSM-5.
Yes. And that's something that I'm finding. The more I learn, the more I recognize that this landscape I would call it the neurodivergent landscape, is rapidly changing, but primarily changing because you don't know until you know. And studying neurodivergence is something that's a little bit newer in terms of human history. So when did you first realize that you were different?
So I think it took me very long to realize that. Even after I had a diagnosis. So my parents first realized that. My mom first realized that I'm ADHD. And I think I was around 8. She's a doctor, so, she picked it up.
Okay.
So I was in Iran in, 2009, a time where, girls couldn't be autistic, couldn't be ADHD. And she really fought for a diagnosis for me.
Oh, wow.
But I didn't really identify with it when I got it, it was more like I was just struggling at school. I was not good at maths, maybe. And that's what it was. It was, there was quite a lot of shame with that.
Right.
I felt broken. I remember the day that I got the diagnosis, and I remember, hearing the words, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. That doesn't sound really fun. To a 9-year-old to be told you're different. And not in a good way, in a way that, you will need medication. And there's also quite a lot of shame with, taking medication, kind of needing to fix something, we take medication. That is our perception, that you take it so you get rid of stuff, you get rid of sickness by taking medication. Unconsciously, that was the narrative that was put on me. I don't think that was, something that people chose, to, give me, but that is how I learned about it. And it was quite, negative. I actually never told anyone. I never told people I'm ADHD until 9 years after.
Wow. How did it affect you when you first found out? Like, did it affect your friendships? How did it affect schooling?
So I think the main thing was I realized there was a reason, and it wasn't my fault.
Okay, good.
So, putting stuff in perspective, I was not doing as well as I was expected to do because of, the way people thought my IQ is in school. But I do think, Iranian standards of education are quite high. So, if I was getting 17, that was a bad grade, but 17 out of 20 is not a bad grade. If I was getting 16 out of 20, that was really bad. I would get lower than that as well. Not saying I wasn't, but, that was quite disappointing in the culture. And it did make me feel, broken. It did make me feel like I'm not good enough. So at the time, I only thought it's a education related thing. And I didn't really reflect on it in kind of context of everything else. It was definitely something I wanted to get rid of. I was told that I'll grow out of it. And I really, I really hold on to that. I was told that multiple times by multiple psychiatrists and multiple psychologists that this is a childhood thing. And you'll grow out of it. And I was waiting for it. I was excited to grow out of it because of all the challenges that comes with it. And, especially different environments, different times, we knew very little about ADHD in 2009 from research perspective, from society perspective. It was always, the narrative of young boys not being able to sit down in classroom, but I was able to sit down in classroom. Was I paying attention? Not really. Not consciously. I was really trying. I remember getting headaches because I wanted to listen. And,
really?
That is quite distressing for a 10-year-old to, want to do something because everyone else is doing it, because it's expected of you, and not being able to do it. I went through different phases of identifying with it. In teenage years, it kind of changed into a superhero narrative.
How's that?
Only focusing on cool stuff that comes with ADHD, because there are lots of cool things that comes with ADHD. I can talk for hours and I can get super excited about a topic. That is fun. My brain does get lots of dopamine by talking about things I'm excited about. And something else that I really hold on to at the time was hyperfocus. So the ability to focus on one task, one thing for hours and hours without getting tired.
Yeah, you guys can do that.
And that was powerful. I could do a lot of stuff in that time. But there are quite some negative aspects of it that I wasn't paying attention to back then. But to stick with the to stick with the superhero phase, I still didn't tell people. I was very focused on positive aspects of it, but I still didn't tell people because superheroes don't tell people that they're superheroes.
So you grew up in Iran. When did you leave?
Yes. So I left in 2018. I was 18. My parents still live there.
And where did you go?
So I went to a boarding school in Switzerland, in the middle of nowhere, right in the middle of Switzerland, on a very cool ski slope and ski resort, with my brother, with my younger brother. And yeah, it was, a progressive school, alternative. Definitely the way my brain worked was, to be in that school, to get that type of education.
How did you get there?
So it was my mom again. So funny story. I didn't know about the concept of gap year. I didn't know you can just take a year out. And that wasn't something we knew. And, I was doing entrance exam for universities in Iran. I was not doing really well emotionally. You don't get any kind of accommodation in Iran, and the exam is quite big. It's a 4-hour exam, or it used to be a 4-hour exam, 100 of multiple choice questions, that covered 4 years of education, or 3 years of education.
Yeah, that's a lot.
That was a lot. I know it's a lot for everyone, regardless of their neurotype. But to add in a little bit of dyslexia, to add in a little bit of ADHD, that just makes it harder.
Yeah.
And I was really struggling with that, I was feeling quite depressed, very anxious because of, all the pressure of wanting to do well, getting into a good school. And as I said before, in Iranian communities, we do have very high standards for education, for everyone, regardless of gender. I think even right now, majority of, university students, STEM university students, are women. But there's quite a lot of pressure into getting into a good course. My mom's a doctor, so there was, quite a lot of societal expectation of me studying medicine. But yeah, I sat down once with my mom. My mom sat me down and she was like, I don't think this is working. And we should do something else. We should find something else. And because I didn't know what I wanted to do for university, because, my entire education was medicine. At the time, I couldn't decide if I wanted to do it or if society wanted me to do it. And I'm super lucky to have, parents like I do. They're very understanding, very open-minded. And they were like, yeah, why? Let's try college. Let's look into college. And you don't need to go to university right now. And when she was doing some research, she remembered that when we were in Switzerland together a year before, it was a very safe environment to be in. And she was like, let's look into Switzerland. And when we're looking into colleges in Switzerland, we were like, oh, we can do high school. You don't need to do college, and you have more time to figure out what you want to do. So yeah, without knowing that, the concept of gap year, we kind of created a gap year that later turned into 2 gap years, 2 years. And yeah, after that, I came to London, to Brighton actually, to do my undergrad in psychology.
That's very interesting. Well, first of all, it sounds like you had really good parents. I wish everybody had parents who are like yours and really tried to go out of their way and do the difficult thing. And there are parents that do, but I see parents that don't. So I'm glad that you had parents that do. And so now you're in London, and now you are doing your undergrad at a school there. So you said that you had issues with self-esteem for very obvious reasons. Yes. How do you feel about yourself now?
Usually, most of the time, pretty good. Not always. But I am really passionate about neurodiversity. And, as I said, with my type of brain, I can get super excited about a topic. And I can really learn and enjoy, learning about that or doing an activity. And for me, being a speaker, being an advocate is really exciting because I'm fighting for what I didn't have. I'm fighting for a narrative that I didn't know even existed. So most of the time, I feel really good. to be neurodivergent. I feel really good to identify as disabled, as neurodivergent, as ADHD, because I feel like that has really led me to be where I am in life. I'm really enjoying my master's right now. You know, like I'm meeting really cool researchers and scientists in different fields. So yeah, I want to say usually very confident, usually very happy, but, you know, we still live in a society that's not built for us. And that's why I think I'm disabled.
I agree. We do live in a society that's not built for people like you.
Yeah.
And when I see people like you, it's I'm really generalizing it because you're not all the same, but,
Yes.
but for people who are neurodivergent, we really, it's too new for, I think our society is learning and starting to understand, but we're really only built for one neurotype and most of us don't fall under it. So we really should question a lot of that. So what are your future plans?
So I'm really excited about that. I want to become a clinical psychologist.
Why?
And in the UK, that's a very long process. So the first day that I got my diagnosis, there was a psychiatrist there and a psychologist. And I found their approach to be quite different, but kind of the same. And that was, I think, one of the first times that I picked up the difference between psychiatry and psychology. But more than that, the reason I want to be one is I really believe in psychiatry. I really believe in medication for mental health, for, like ADHD. But what I needed when I was 10, when I was 11, was lots of psychological input, was psychoeducation, was a therapy that keeps in mind my type of brain. And that was not something that was available. So I'm, again, super lucky. My parents were very aware of, different mental health issues. And we did try different therapists. But they would all say, are you taking ADHD medication? You just need to up the dose. And maybe I did, I'm not saying I didn't. But at the same time, I needed to learn what ADHD was, what it meant, how it was going to impact, other aspects of my life. For, 9 years, I thought it's going to be only education related. And I was waiting to, get rid of it. I was told that it'll be gone when I'm 18.
Right.
Which, now with science, we know majority of people are ADHD for their entire life. But yeah, so I think that's why I want to be a clinical psychologist, is I'm really passionate about inclusion and accessibility and how we can adopt our approach for different people and individualize it. So, I feel like I didn't have that. And that's what I needed. So I want to be that for someone else.
I love that. What I hear you saying is that you want to be the change. You're going to be the change you want to see. You're going to do what you didn't have done for you. And I have a lot of respect for people that do that. Because I think it's very much needed. We can take all of the things that we've been through. In your case, it's neurodivergence. In other people's case, it's something else. But anything we've been through and we've dealt with and we've experienced, we can take that and turn it around and use it as a gem to help others. And I love that you're doing that. Now, with that being said, what changes do you want to see in the world concerning people like you?
So I want us to start using the right language. I think language that we use, vocabularies that we use, really impact the way we think, really impact the way we see people. So, for me now, when I say I'm disabled, I see it as a very neutral word. But other people don't.
Right.
A lot of people see it as, kind of like a negative thing. No, you're just differently abled. We change it to make it more palatable. But we already have a vocabulary. We already have a word that is neutral. So why don't we use that? Why do we need to give it a positive twist? Because we see it as a negative thing. That's why we're changing it. And I think that's the same with ADHD. That's the same with autism. Saying that there is a hierarchical kind of like acceptance when it comes to neurodiversity. And I think in most Western societies, dyslexia is on top in terms of like acceptance. It's okay to be dyslexic. That is something that we test a lot of people for. I think in UK, majority of students get tested for it. So that's very accepted. But then ADHD is the next step. You know, yeah, you can be a little bit bubbly, a little bit fidgety, that's okay. But then autism doesn't fall into that category. You know, autism is like, oh, you know, like typically when people think of autism, they think of someone with higher support needs, which, you know, is autistic. That person is still autistic. I'm not saying it's not. But because for the longest time, we've only learned about one type of, you know, one group of autistic people. We don't know the variety of like how autism can be in different people, in women, in non-binary people, because, you know, we did the research on white men. We don't know how it can be, you know, with brown people, with black people. Lots of medical racism comes into that. We don't really refer black children to services because, you know, there is a perception of like, you know, wrong sexist and wrong racist perception when it comes to, you know, who we refer to a service for a diagnosis. So I think the first thing is like, let's get the language right. Neurodiverse is all of us, including neurotypicals, including the majority of people who have, you know, they have the dominant neurological background, neurological brain, but also neurodivergent people. But neurodivergent is the group of people who diverge. And these are all inclusive categories, inclusive labels, and they are neutral. We as a society give them value. You know, like when we go around and call a doctor who has ADHD a high functioning person, that's quite bad. Like, are we taking away the fact that that person is ADHD? They might identify as disabled, they might not. By law, ADHD is a disability in the UK. I think it is in the US as well, and Australia. But yeah, you know, like when you call someone high functioning, you kind of take away the fact that they also struggle with stuff. You only focus on the fact that they're putting a mask for you and they are, you know, kind of conforming to our society's standards without the challenges that it's having for them on their mental health, on their physical health. So yeah, let's not use functioning labels. That's, you know, not a very nice label to use. Let's also see what that person uses, what language they uses. So if they say, I have autism, then that's what I'm going to refer to. But majority of people have said that they are autistic, and multiple research across the world, they said they prefer autistic than having autism because that's a part of their identity. They don't see it as something separate that they can just leave out. So going back to that, learn about the language. Learn what people want to use and respect that. And, you know, I've identified with ADHD differently throughout my life. And I don't think there was, you know, a right narrative or a wrong narrative. The one that I'm in right now is a neutral one. I struggle with lots of stuff, but there's also lots of strength that comes with it. So, for example, the hyperfocus example that I gave before, yes, it can be super cool to focus on something for hours and hours and hours. But at the same time, I will forget to eat. I will forget to drink. I will forget to, you know, attend to my adult responsibilities. And that is disabling. That is, you know, something that we don't talk about.
It's out of balance is what it is. Yeah. It can be having the hyper focus. Hey, that can be good in a lot of job positions. Some people will pay you a lot of money to be hyper focused on certain things, but it can be out of balance. I get what you're saying. But what I also hear what you're saying is that the changes that you want to see, they're not going to happen just by systems alone. It seems like they're going to happen by conversations like this.
Yes, that's why I really believe in conversations like this. Yes. And to have conversations with people who don't think the way we do. It can be hard sometimes when, you know, people are telling you your identity is not correct. But we should still engage in different type of conversations.
We all should, and I really kind of focus on that, which is why I have people talk about it. I've talked about neurodivergence on here before, but this conversation is totally different than the other ones, and that's the way I want it to be because there's more than one perspective on just about everything, and I think it's important to listen to those perspectives, but also because of your age, you're speaking from yourself, but I know for a fact that you're speaking for many, many, many others who may not have this microphone right now. And so I'm glad that you came on and we could listen to what you have to say. And I think that we should spend more time listening to people that we categorize and treat as projects instead of people. And so if we listen to people like you, I think it gives us the opportunity to gain a new perspective and maybe listen instead of just going on labels alone. And I mean the negative in a negative way, because when people use negative labels in a negative way, as you said, it can be very damaging. And I think it's important to hear the humanness from you instead. So one last thing, what advice do you have for other people in the world who are just like you right now?
I think the first one is it's okay to feel whatever you're feeling about the fact that you're different, about the fact that you're neurodivergent. There's quite a lot of, different emotions that comes with it at different times. And I want to say, it does get easier. It does. But there are times that things will remind you of all the challenges again, like a job interview, a conversation with your manager, a conversation with a teacher, does make it difficult. But it's okay to feel, like all the feelings. And for me, those were lots of shame, lots of, feeling broken, feeling different, feeling that this world is unfair. Why should I be the one, struggling with the things that I'm struggling with? Lots of joy, I love a fun new hyperfocus, like hyperfixating on a new activity. That can be so fun. I can learn so much. And especially, it's very helpful when it is related to my job. It is related to what I want to do. The other ones can be a little bit, throw me off the track and lose quite a bit of hours, but usually it's really fun. And it's okay to feel, differently about it at different times in life. And it's not, going back if you feel shame again. And the other thing is you're not alone. There are lots and lots of amazing people who are neurodivergent, who do amazing stuff, because they're neurodivergent. But at the same time, there are things that they struggle with. And, lots of doctors, lots of engineers, lots of athletes that we know, lots of actors, which I'm sure you already know about all of them, or many of them. They are neurodivergent. And potentially, one of the reasons that they're really good at it is the fact that they're neurodivergent. We have lots of autistic people who are doctors, who are in healthcare, and they do amazing stuff because of the way their brain works.
Yes, there is a lot of beauty. There's a lot of beauty in different thinking. And, I always say when God made this world, he didn't make us all the same for good reason. You don't get jambalaya with just rice. You got to put some beans and meat in there. All of us being different is part of the beauty of what makes things work. Well, Shirin, I really enjoyed speaking with you, and even the off-air, very long conversation we had before even recording this. We probably should record some of that. But you've been really a joy to talk to, and I hope to see you on bigger stages in the future. In fact, I'd be surprised if I don't. I think you are a fighter, and I think there are a lot of people's lives that are going to be made better by you getting on stage and talking. So thank you for getting on this stage and talking today.
No, thank you. This was a lot of fun for me. Thanks for having me.
And now for a mind-shifting moment. I want you to think about this. Something she mentioned earlier is not just true for Shirin. There are lots and lots of people walking around who are in fact neurodivergent, but undiagnosed. Our society hasn't caught up. Science has not caught up with reality yet. It will. People are working on it, but we're not there yet. I want you to think about this. The next time you notice someone who's weird, a little fidgety, kind of disconnected socially, a little bit awkward, or so many other little tics and things that just seem a little off, perhaps, just perhaps, they're neurodivergent and undiagnosed or don't know it. I want you to think about it. The next time you're around someone who seems a little quote unquote weird, maybe they're not weird, maybe they're just undiagnosed. I want you to consider how you view people who are different than you. You've been listening to Mind Shift Power Podcast. For complete show notes on this episode and to join our global movement, find us at fatimabay.com. Until next time, always remember, there's power in shifting your thinking.
Oh.